Hi everyone and welcome to this webinar where we're going to introduce the Vocus Managed Detection and Response Service. This MDR service will help you simplify and reduce the cost of both monitoring your cyber environment and also responding to any threats or events that might occur. And in the end, you can increase your cyber resiliency and make sure you can continue operating even in the worst case of something happening in your network. So my name is Stephen Mullaney. I'm our sales specialist for cyber at Vocus. And joining me today is Gareth Cleves, who is our senior product manager for our cyber products. Okay, so what's the context or the background here? And there are a few trends in the industry that I think are driving this. And the first one is cyber has very much gone from being an end to itself to being something that has to support the wider business goals. And when I go and talk to customers, this is a really common theme about cyber needing to be an enabler, needing to be a platform, and not being seen as a blocker, which it has traditionally been. So that's requiring a little bit of a mindset change on IT and cyber departments. Underpinning this is some specific trends I see when I go talk to customers. You see it in industry research, and you may even have the same challenge yourself. And the first one is, what was a nice, tightly defined and protected environment is now something that's spread across everything from cloud to existing data centers to users on the road, potentially devices on a site, and of course the traditional office worker. So this idea of a distributed enterprise, it was already happening well before COVID. People were already moving to the cloud for many years. People were also working from home for many years. COVID just accelerated that side of the equation. But really what it means is now we really are in this position where it's almost unstoppable, this distribution of enterprise operations. And we then need to think about, how do I protect such a disparate environment? And then how do I even know what's going on? And then what do I do about it? The way the security industry is changing is moving away from just simply being a protection mechanism. It's now about how can I support the wider business goals. So when I go talk to customers, one customer actually said to me, he said, "Look, Stephen, don't come and talk to me about cyber protection. I've got some particular business goals I need to support as the CIO. How is cyber going to do that? How can I enable things like user experience, regardless of where they are?" So there's very much a sort of mindset change of we can't be the blocker of business, which is traditionally what cyber has been seen as, but now it has to become part of the achieving the business goals. It has to become a platform from which the business can innovate and grow. But this is a challenge because there's a lot going on underneath the covers. And the first one is this concept of distributed enterprise. So in the good old days, we had a very tightly defined IT environment. It had firewalls around the outside, and everything outside was bad, and everything inside was good. But even before COVID, this whole IT infrastructure was beginning to be distributed. So data was moving into the cloud, whether it's SaaS applications, whether it's a cloud like Azure or GWS, and then also workers were starting to work from home pre-COVID, and that accelerated, obviously. But also, you had data coming from different sources as well, be it IoT devices and other monitoring and the like. So all of a sudden, you've got data everywhere, connected over the internet, and this really complicates what you need to protect, what you need to monitor, and how you react. So that's the first trend: is how do I cope with this distributed enterprise? The second one is around, I suppose, a maturing of the view from just being protecting assets, protecting data, to being one of cyber resiliency and business resilience. So I think now people understand, even with the best protection in place, there's always the chance that a phishing email will get through, or there'll be a day zero exploit, or something that causes disruption to the business through things like ransomware and other threats out there. So how do I make sure that my business can continue operating either immediately after the fact or very soon after the fact? So what are the tools, the processes and the like that I need to put in place to make sure I can bounce back from any particular cyber event? And obviously I want to minimize the impact of that cyber event as well. And the final one is around optimization and consolidation. And one of the key things I hear from CIOs and CISOs is, in quotes, "I'm stuck in the weeds." And the reason for that is, there aren't tools that can actually, monitor the network. There aren't automation tools. They're trying to do everything themselves, and they're finding it's actually quite an intractable problem. It's expensive to run your own SOC. It's expensive to buy the tools. What about the people? Can you even keep them? And then you have to keep abreast of all of the threats, all the intelligence out there to try and make head or tail of all the log files and everything you're seeing. And indeed, the reports out there, research out there says up to 30% of cyber breaches aren't even detected by in-house tools, and up to 70% of time is spent chasing the tail on false positives. So it is a very difficult problem. We need to really look at how we optimize that, both from a technology standpoint, but again also through processes, and also how do I consolidate my tool sets. That's the other big thing. I've got 20 vendors in there today. How can I reduce that to my key 3 or 4 vendors? Reduce the overlap, reduce any potential gaps, and of course, reduce the cost of protecting and making my organization cyber resilient. So under all this, a picture's worth 1,000 words. So what is the real challenge here? Why are we considering these things? And that is, as I said before, we've got this idea of the distributed enterprise. And I think the picture more or less speaks for itself in terms of illustrating that data, people, applications can really be everywhere now. And as you can see, it opens up threats that weren't there before. In a good old MPLS network with one gateway to the internet, it was pretty easy, or comparatively easy, to protect. But now you've got offices connected to the internet, branches connected to the internet. That suddenly exposes threats coming in. You've got employees working from home accessing very confidential data, or even customer data. The same with third parties who might need to do support. You need to dial in and do support, or it could be that your business relies heavily on contractors and mobile, and it's a high staff turnover industry. How do I protect my data in that case? And then on the bottom left-hand corner, we've got newer devices in the IoT or OT land that used to be air-gapped. These used to be on their own networks, and they certainly wouldn't cross the internet and wouldn't intermingle with IT traffic. And now, that is very much happening. So how do I protect these new threats to devices that were never, ever designed to be protected from the internet or protected from cyber threats? And then on the right-hand side of the corner, it's a similar story about where my data is and where my users are actually going to on the internet. So we've now got data that was behind a firewall, is now sitting in many cases, SaaS applications. It could be sitting in private cloud in AWS or Azure or Google, and more than likely a mixture. The other thing is, workers from home, often in their downtime or on their lunch break, may want to look at the internet themselves and use their work laptops. So how do I make sure that my employees or users who used to be behind firewalls are now going off into the internet to do things themselves? And how do I make sure they don't inadvertently affect their own laptops and then bring that back into the office? So this is really now quite a complex problem, touching many, many points. And even if you then do go and manage to protect all these points with firewalls and SASE and SD-WAN and whatever it might be, all these tools are going to be generating a lot of log files, a lot of data. And how do you actually sift through all of that data, that gigabytes of data a day, to understand what data is there that's important for you, that's telling you that there's a potential problem being breached or that someone's trying to breach you? How do you maintain a platform big enough to actually take all this data in and perform queries for you? How do you find the staff to actually analyze all of those log files and then use their own smarts and the threat intelligence tools that are out there, or feeds, and then actually decide that there's actually been a challenge in the network? So it's not just about protection, it's also about how do I detect this being problems or threats, how do I neutralize them and recover as quick as possible to keep my cyber resiliency and operations running. So our customers, Vocus customers, are asking us this question ourselves. So we've been thinking, long and hard about how we can help our customers grow their cyber resiliency. And really, it's been partly about us looking at how we do it ourselves and the best practices we've learned operating, large networks and lots of data, including end consumer data that we need to protect. What are the best practices we've learned? How can we take those best practices to our customers, and how can we help them use the tools and the processes and everything to actually build up their cyber resiliency? And so we help our customers through a variety of different ways as they think about how they identify what they need to protect, how they actually put in the controls to protect the network and data and applications, how they detect and then respond to cyber incidents, and then finally, how do they recover and keep the business running? So we're able to help our customers basically through that life cycle, through a set of consulting services to understand where you are today and where you need to go, and what the steps are between. We have a set of services, both managed services and consulting services, to help you actually put in your protection and test your protection. And then importantly, about what we're going to talk more about today is how can we actually detect and then respond to cyber events, and how can we reduce the time from detection to response and recovery. And then finally, to close the resiliency life cycle, is what are the different I suppose services Vocus has can help there, which may not necessarily be cyber. There could be things like, have I got diverse internet connectivity so I'm protected from DDoS? Do I have colo so I can have standby copies of my applications or data so I can recover very quickly? So we really look at across the entire portfolio of services how we can help our customers with building up their cyber resiliency. So on that note, we're going to talk now specifically about our managed detection and response service. And I'm actually going to hand over to my colleague here, Gareth Cleaves, who's going to take us through what MDR does, its benefits, and obviously how it works. So, Gareth, over to you.
Yeah, thank you. And so MDR conceptually is a technology and a service and an offering that's designed to help you make sense of the noise. So as time has progressed, we've had so many new security controls come into our businesses. We've had SASE, we've had firewalls with next generation capabilities that give us a deeper view of the network than we've had in the past. The one thing that all these have in common, though, is a huge volume of alerts, a huge volume of data. SASE, for example, you could have an alert coming through saying that this person is trying to send an Excel spreadsheet outside the company. That's great information to have, but how do you action it? How do you categorize the threat that might be coming along with that action that somebody inside your company is taking? We really need to look at an automated system that does triage for you, that does management of the volume of data that you're going to be looking at. And MDR, Managed Detection and Response, is designed to provide that. So if we want to assess a detection and response capability, if we say, okay, that's what we want a system that helps us make sense of this flood of information we're dealing with. So what are the criteria? What are the things that we need to look for? So some of these are not technology. As you're probably not surprised to hear, these aren't just technology problems to solve. But an MDR needs to be well integrated into your business and into the business's priorities, including sponsorship from the leadership team. So if this platform generates an alert that says, "Hey, something bad is happening at 2:00 in the morning," then the business needs to be set up to action that, right? Again, there's even with the triage, even with the alerting system, if the alert goes somewhere and then no one does anything with it, then it's not really valuable. Similarly, the MDR needs to have some awareness of the context in which the business operates. For example, the threat profile for a company that handles credit card information is quite different for a company that doesn't. So an MDR needs to be aware that, for some companies, a credit card being sent in a fax or in an email attachment is a very bad thing. For others, it's allowed inside their process. So we need to have that awareness of what your business does and the kind of data it handles regularly. Detection and response doesn't need to be well resourced. We very often see in our customers that generally security incident response is seen as a responsibility of the IT team. That the IT team has to come in and, in addition to their day job, try to understand what an incident means and what actions are required to take it. We have to have decent resourcing in place for these systems to work. MDR also needs to be supported, as I was covering, by a response plan, right? So again, in that scenario where you find that information has been shared outside of your business, who's responsible for following that up? Who owns the insider threat risk inside the company? Who do you call at 2 o'clock on a Sunday morning? Is there a name? Is there a number? And again, these aren't always technology problems, right? This is an organizational process that needs to be worked through inside your company. On the technology side, though, one of the most valuable things you can do with the detection and response capability is give it as much data as you can. So I'll take you through this in the upcoming slides, but if you can combine information from your Office 365 tenancy with your CrowdStrike endpoint protection with your wireless access controller, that can give you a really unique view of user activity that you're not going to get with just one of those. And I'll take you through an example after this of what that looks like. Most importantly, is it needs to be able to do something actionable. If we replace a flood of alerts coming from all these individual sensors with a flood of useless alerts coming from an MDR instead, then we haven't really done your service. So the MDR does need to be able to generate actionable alerts, actionable insights from the data that we're sending you. And so on the next slide, I will take you through some of the challenges associated with this. So what I'm talking about here is sometimes called a SIEM. And I want to sort of call out the differences between a SIEM and an MDR here in the context of some of the problems associated with SIEM. So a SIEM is a technology platform that brings together all the data which we talked about previously, but that's just the technology piece of it. The MDR service seeks to address some of the other challenges which are called out here. So if you're going to gather all this information together, it does require continuous investment and commitment from the organization. If you have new vulnerabilities, new CVEs coming out, which is going to be happening every week for the rest of our lives, I think, there's a continuous investment just in assessing those CVEs and those vulnerabilities that the organization needs to make. And again, MDR looks to reduce that burden on your organization by pooling the effort required to do that. A really big challenge in Australia, again, not a technology problem, trying to get someone with a security experience and security knowledge to work night shift in Australia. That's actually a big challenge, both from a cost point of view, the cost of those people tends to be quite high, but also just from a retention point of view. If you have a look at retention rates for staff working night shift, it does tend to be a lot lower than people who do a 9 to 5. Some organizations solve that by offshoring. So, move the team to a time zone where, they're going to be awake and alert. But that then, can be a data sovereignty issue. Depending on the industry you're in, this might not be allowed to do that. And you have to keep things in Australia. You can also just run 9 to 5 to say, hey, look, we are a 9 to 5 business. We don't really mind if the business has a disruption outside of those hours. That doesn't actually change the total workload, though. So it just means that the people working 9 to 5 will be working, twice or 3 times as hard to cover those 24 hours inside 8. The other thing that makes these things successful is their long-term institutionalization inside the organization. So, once a SIEM has been running for 3 or 4 years, then you've got a lot of insights built up, and you've got a lot of knowledge about, what's normal and what's not, and what constitutes a wake up the boss at 2 in the morning versus a regular alert that can be reviewed and then filed. Again, for MDR, we really try to look at this as a long-term relationship. With the MDR service, we can build up that knowledge of your business and what's normal and what's not, and help you retain that knowledge without it being linked to a particular staff member or a particular project that can be hard to keep funded in the long run if it's an internal project. And finally, SIEM and some of these technologies have for so too long been treated as a technology program, right? You buy the SIEM, you plug it into your antivirus and into your firewalls, and then you can walk away from it. But the reality is that that's not how it works for the reasons I've just outlined. It does need to be a continuous investment in people, processes, acquisition of new data sources, development of new use cases. And we think that the MDR approach, which turns all of those sort of challenges into a monthly cost, into an operational model, really helps our customers to derive the benefits of these software platforms without the initial cost of doing so, but also the effort and additional cost of keeping them operating. So if we move to the next slide. So MDR, what does it do? So our MDR combines a SIEM platform, which we fully host and license, with a managed security operations center to provide a managed detection and response capability. And that's done on an OpEx model, where the way this is paid for is on a monthly basis, based on the amount of data and the amount of size of the organization we're working with. So we use a 24/7 shared security operations center that's located in Sydney and in Hobart, so 100% onshore in Australia, to provide 24/7 coverage. Means that we have redundancy. If there's a power outage in Hobart or in Sydney, then that can fail over to the other SOC, but that's still done in a onshore data sovereign way. We can take data that's common to customers. So a lot of our customers, for example, might have the same version of a web server running. And we can say, hey, look, these are the customers with this version of Apache or whatever running, and then distribute that information out over multiple customers. We can say, this version of PHP is being exploited. We know that these customers have that version of PHP and they need to be notified. So again, we can get a richer security context by looking over multiple customers in a shared model. However, the actual data that you're sending us remains private and is obviously not shared across multiple customers. The SIEM platform is fully operated. So again, one of the big challenges with SIEM traditions is it's quite expensive to license and requires quite a infrastructure investment as well. That's all packaged and provided as part of the service. So you don't need to worry about paying your licenses for Splunk or paying your licenses for QRadar or anything like that. All of that is bundled in together. And so that platform takes data from customers, from whatever log sources you nominate and share with us, and shares it with data come from third-party feeds. So we'll take feeds from other threat intelligence sources that say, hey, even outside of this shared MDR platform, we're seeing a lot of exploits directed against these sort of platforms at the moment. And we can use that third-party data to contextualize what you're sending us. Probably the most valuable part is access to the shared IP and use cases. Working over a large number of customers and a large number of industries and a large threat landscape really gives us a scale advantage in developing the monitoring technologies and the use cases that we're looking at. We have years of experience built up in the SOC, and it's done in a way that you don't have to make that investment of years of people and time and everything else. And by combining that information that we've built up institutionally inside the SOC with third-party threat information, because again, this is a constantly changing landscape, we can provide a better service, we believe, than you can by doing it internally, by doing it yourself. Unless you're a very large organization, we really think this is going to be a better outcome for you than trying to do this stuff inside your organization. And on the next slide. So I'd like to take you through conceptually, what's the experience of an MDR service. So the most basic sort of alert is going to be a situation normal, nothing happening alert. So, for example, if I log into my PC in the morning, that's going to trigger an alert out of our authentication system, which can go into a SIEM and be filed along with probably millions of other very similar alerts saying, yes, Gareth logged in this morning. He did it with the correct password, with the correct two-factor authentication, and this is all situation normal. On the other hand, equally simple, if I try to log in 15 million times in 2 minutes, then that's a very clear block that's going to be set off on the authentication system that we're using, saying, no, that's obviously suspicious. That's someone trying to break into Gareth's account. Again, this is all very straightforward. Don't need a SIEM for this. This is the basic use case. The next simple example, Gareth, tries to copy a Excel file full of customer details with all their addresses and phone numbers and contact details, and he tries to copy that onto his personal Google Drive, not onto the company OneDrive. So that is an alert that will be sent out. In this case, the alert coming from the SASE software we have installed. But although this is a simple alert, this is something that requires action, right? So someone trying to break into my account, depending on the threat profile of your organization, might just be something that's a random sort of reconnaissance attempt. May not require action. For some organizations it will, for some it won't. However, me trying to copy the customer information out of my laptop, and maybe the day before I've resigned, or maybe I'm planning to resign the day after, that's something that requires an intervention. And that's where the MDR can help you contextualize that and say, okay, this is something that's going to be categorized as a misuse of internal information at our company. This needs to be routed through our resolution process for how do we handle staff members doing inappropriate things with customer data. And that means that, depending on the role I'm in, if I'm a senior manager in the company with access to sensitive information, that could be a wake up the boss at 2 a.m. situation. So that can be quite important. And then on the next slide, some small, complex examples. So what happens if I log into my work PC as previously, but it's coming from a Californian IP address range? However, we know from my profile in the Active Directory that I'm a carrier relations manager and I travel a lot. So that work's already been done to classify me as a roaming employee. So that's okay. Basically, this is in the normal range of things that should happen. So we get that information by combining two information sources. Though we have SASE acting as a VPN replacement, logging in from California. But we also have my profile, which is built up in Active Directory, saying, yes, Gareth is on the travels a lot list. We're not going to be too stressed if he logs in from weird locations at weird times of night. On the other hand, if same scenario, I log in from my PC in California, I'm flagged as someone who travels, but the MDR is also integrated with our building management system, and they can see that I just swapped into the Sydney office. On the other hand, it could also be integrated with our wireless access controller, and they could see that my laptop is sitting in the Sydney office based on which access point it's paired to. So that would be very suspicious that I'm in two places at once and trying to log in. However, maybe there is a reason for this. Maybe I did the wrong thing and lent my pass to someone because they put a new building security system in. And, that person was like, oh, I forgot my pass. Can you lend me yours before you go away? That's not good, but it requires a different response to, a break-in of the SASE platform or something like that. And again, that's where we take the incident, we gather as much information as we can, and then we take it to you, the customer, and say, hey, this is what we've seen. From here, can you have a look and see what the next action is? And so on to this next slide. Let's just break that down into another example. Now, this is actually based on a real thing that happened with one of our customers. A couple of things I'd like to call out. So when we look at the data that we see on our MDR platform, most attacks that we see against customers in the Australian time zone are actually between 6 a.m. and 9 a.m. in the morning. And so this attack was one of those as well. So again, not unfortunately in your standard 9 to 5 working hours, which would be very convenient for everyone. Instead, this is something that will happen at odd times of night. So in this customer's case, the MDR received an alert that they were logging. There was a login to their AWS console in the management plane of their AWS environment from a South African IP address. The login was done with root credentials, so access to everything on the AWS platform. And they ran a command called describe account attributes, which is an AWS command that basically lists all the different user accounts inside AWS that have been set up and what permissions all of those accounts have. And that's a very valuable reconnaissance activity where they're trying to find an account that has permissions to do things inside that AWS tenancy. So the MDR processes that alert, and then it gets passed to one of the SOC analysts as a high priority. So obviously the MDR is smart enough to say, anything to do with an AWS login from an offshore IP running these sort of commands, that needs to go to a human SOC analyst as fast as possible. And the technology, reviews that data point, and then passes it to a human being. The human being, the SOC analyst, reviews that alert, and they say, yes, this is suspicious. So there's always a human review of a P1 before it gets sent to a customer. Inside 30 minutes, which is the SLA from detection to us giving you a call, that SOC operator will call the nominated out-of-hours contact at your business, and they're going to advise that there's a potential incident. You can see here a couple of things. So we can detect these things, but really important that we have a strong working relationship, that we have a well-established set of processes with the customer, because you can see if we don't have that nominated out-of-hours contact, then this sort of comes undone. So we really rely on working tightly and with our customers in these services to get you a really effective outcome from the MDR service. And then there's sort of two ways that this can go. So the customer advises, hey, look, this IT person who's in charge of my AWS had to go back to South Africa to take care of family, and he's working remotely. This is okay. This is a normal thing that happens in his day-to-day work. It's just unusual that he's doing it from South Africa. So in that instance, we'd probably say, okay, good to know. Let's update the playbook so that we don't call you again at 6 in the morning. And maybe we build a process so that, when you have staff with access to those sort of platforms traveling, we can have a notification system to avoid, again, waking you up in future. However, in this instance, and this is what actually happened, there's no reason someone from South Africa should be getting into their AWS. And so they have enacted their incident response plan. And in this case, they have to acknowledge that someone has root credentials for their AWS instance. They've already done this reconnaissance, and they need to move pretty quickly on this. And we'll provide guidance on how to resolve that incident. And so this is really the life cycle. This is the target state we want to get to for a customer with MDR, is that we have enough knowledge about your business to say that, hey, someone logging in from South Africa is not normal for this company, whereas it might be for another company. We have threat intelligence coming in from all these good log sources, like your AWS platform, like your VPN, whatever else. And with all of that, we can really improve your ability to detect and respond to a potential security incident on the platform. Next slide.
So, look, in wrapping up, I suppose one of the big questions is, why would you buy security services like MDR from a telco like Vocus? Often people think of MSSPs as the place to go, but there's some really good reasons. First one is, and a key one for Vocus, and something for you to think about is, our service, like all of our services, is fully sovereign. So like Gareth said, we are running it from 2 SOCs, one in Hobart, one in Sydney, and all of our analysts, all of our experts are actually in country. So your data actually never leaves the country at all. And this can obviously be very important with the fact that threats are global threats are increasing. So making sure you understand where your data is obviously very important. The second one is, Vocus typically offers quite a few different services, from connectivity to security and the like. And what that allows us to do is basically get more information, more fidelity about your environment by taking those feeds in. So, for example, if you were to engage Vocus to provide SD-WAN or managed firewall or something like that, SASE, not only will we take in logs from things like your Active Directory or your own wireless access points and the like, we would also take those feeds in from our own managed services endpoints as well, so our firewalls or our SASE agents or whatever. So that means you suddenly, or we together, suddenly get a much fuller picture of your environment from the ground up. Not just your own on-site or cloud services, but also any services that are provided through Vocus as well. And that visibility is obviously critical in understanding where threats may be coming from. Also, the underlying network is often discounted in people's minds. It's just internet. But really, when you think about cyber services, if we go right back to the start, where I mentioned that a lot of companies are now asking for cyber, looking for cyber to be an enabler for the business, not just a blocker. Having a highly available, fast and protected connectivity layer is also extremely important. And if you think about, many attacks are based on DDoS, And so making sure your internet connectivity is protected from DDoS attacks is critically important, because if your network goes down, all the MDR in the world, all the SaaS in the world won't help if people can't connect to your websites or users can't connect to their applications. So, you really have to think about that foundation and the layers above it in building up your connectivity and security environment, and then how MDR sort of monitors that and responds to it. And finally, Vocus has had to works with partners through the industry, and as I said earlier on, we took a good hard look at how we do things and what we believe is the best way and best in class. And so we took that knowledge out, and we made sure we chose partners who align with that culture, and we believe in them, and together 2 and 2 equals 5. So we really do make sure that the partners that we work with are going to provide you with the service and the outcomes that you'd expect from a brand like Vocus. Okay, so finally, look, last slide, just to really summarize. So what we've talked about today is that, as we think about this distributed enterprise with data and people everywhere connected over the internet, threats are only increasing. There's not a day you don't see another threat or another breach in the press. So we've been working with our customers. They've been asking us, look, how do we ensure that we are resilient, both cyber and operationally resilient in this kind of hostile environment? And part of that is being able to monitor, detect, and respond to events. But we know, and our customers have found, some of them have tried and come back to us and said we couldn't do it. We know it's a complicated thing to do with, as Gareth said, people are expensive. Getting people to do night shift is difficult. The platforms are expensive. So we take a lot of that cost and complexity away from you, and then provide you with basically actionable insights. You're not stuck in the weeds. You're only looking at the data and the events you really need to look at, and you are not wasting your time, chasing your tail with false positives and the like. So I think the final takeaway really is, as you're thinking about your cyber resiliency, as you're thinking about how you're going to monitor, how you're going to use your cyber tools to their best effect, is to have a good think about where it makes sense to do this kind of monitoring and where it makes sense to augment your existing team and partner with someone else to do that. And then on that note, we'll leave you to it. So thank you very much for joining, and everyone have a great day.